You are listening to the Stand Out Now podcast with your host, Dave Mendonca. Check out each episode as top experts share their proven marketing, publicity, and sales tips to help you cut through the advertising noise so you can reach your ideal clients, get noticed, and connect with powerful influencers. The Stand Out Now podcast is brought to you by podcastinterviewexperts.com, helping entrepreneurs attract clients through business podcast guest appearances.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening. Today I have a terrific guest who is all about helping you to better manage your time and be more productive in your life. She's the author of books such as Off the Clock, I Know How She Does It, and What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast. She's also a speaker and a married mother of 4 small kids. Think about that. 4 kids. Wow. She's a warrior and a guest I'm honored to have on the podcast. Laura Vanderkam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure, Laura. Laura, 4 kids. How do we do this? How do we manage being an author and a speaker with these small alien beings running around?
There's juggling, but we have some good systems in our house. You just kind of think about who needs to be where and make it work. You have a lot of help, and that certainly makes things easier as well.
A tip of the cap to you, Laura. That's just ridiculous. It's incredible. All right, so let's jump right into it. This is a regular question I ask my guests. We ask you to go back in time when you were a kid. Now, what marketing or sales or persuasive strategies, knowingly or unknowingly, did you use as a kid to get what you wanted?
Yeah, well, I was entrepreneurial fairly early on. I lived both in North Carolina and Indiana when I was growing up. And in both places, I had a pretty good babysitting operation going that, making money that way. 3 summers, in fact, 2 with one friend in North Carolina and 1 with a friend in Indiana. I ran a summer camp for area children, when I was a teenager. And I would just have them come to our backyard. They'd pay us a certain amount for 2 hours in the morning. And so parents who wanted to drop their kids off for a little bit could come to it. So it was a question of how you get that news out. But figured out all kinds of things if you had a sibling discount, for instance. And then we'd had a cap on how many kids we'd take per week, but then we'd go up one if it was a sibling pair because we didn't want to say, well, you can't go because then you'd get the extra in. But
right.
So figuring out who would come. Even figuring out sometimes that our marketing was broader than even our parents thought it was. I remember one summer, one of the weeks we were going to do the camp corresponded with the church Bible school that my parents went to that church. And my mom was like, well, don't you think that's not a great week to do it? Because all the kids would be going to that instead. And I was like, well, actually, our reach is broader. It's neighborhood people who don't go to the church. It's people we know through other things. And it turns out it was right. We had good attendance that week too. So the babysitting thing has always been a good way to make money, and figured out a way to expand the reach a little bit and, more than just one kid at a time.
So wait a sec. How old were you with the camp stuff? Because if you were really young and you had that kind of grasp on the target market, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, 11, 12, and 13, I think were the years I did it.
Are you kidding me? And you had the idea of yeah, Mom, this is our main target. This is what we hit right here.
Well, I had a friend who did it with me too. So I guess, my friend both in North Carolina and in Indiana, the different people that I did it with were also, entrepreneurial oriented, it turns out.
Wow. So getting the word out, was it just word of mouth?
Yeah, well, it was obviously our current babysitting clients because my friends and I were doing a good business in that regard. And, people in the neighborhood, we'd make flyers. Obviously, people through things like church that our parents knew that, we volunteered in Sunday school and things like that. So we knew kids through there. So lots of different segments.
Got it. Okay. And you've used some of those in your current life?
Being a veteran babysitter, I guess, means that when you become a parent, it's not quite as disorienting as it might be. I know people who've become parents and have really not ever changed a diaper, which was not my experience. But it makes you know that kids go through different phases. When they do things, you're not flummoxed by oh, is he supposed to be crawling now or is he not? And you're just reading baby books that may have nothing to do with real life. But I've always really been on my own. The truth is I don't really think of myself as kind of the traditional entrepreneur, and that I'm not trying to start some huge business, but I've been out on my own pretty much the whole time. I had one job a year after college, but it wasn't a job that was supposed to keep going. I mean, it was a year-long position. And after that, I've been self-employed. So, yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about your realm of focus. I mentioned it in the intro about time management, productivity. So you're done with college. Is that when you focused on time management and productivity as your expertise? Like, when did this start, like this brand?
I wish there was a really good story about it. It was kind of a confluence of events, of both that it was a topic I'd long been interested in, and sort of looking back on the topics I've written about in the past, I was always asking people about their schedules, and particularly people who had interesting personal lives in addition to their professional lives. I was working in journalism. That's what I've always done. I freelanced for newspapers in college just to make money, and pretty much kept doing that, even though I had a job for a year as well. I was at a newspaper and I wrote there too. So I was always interested in schedules. And then when I became a parent myself, of course, that added even more to the question about how do I balance different things? How do I advance my career while also spending time with my kids, having time for myself as well, for my own personal priorities. And so there are lots of topics I like to write about, but that was one I was writing about that people were particularly interested in. And so as a good marketing person, you realize like, well, I could write experimental poetry or I could write about baseball, but nobody seems to care. So I will write about time management. And once you write one book on a topic, that's sort of what you become known for. And I've enjoyed it. Like, you can write about a lot through the lens of time management. It really can cover a wide variety of things.
So speaking of content, like writing and whatnot, have you always been a writer? Because I know you mentioned journalism as well early on. Has this always been in you?
Yeah, this is it. I didn't come to writing to share the time management ideas. It was that I was a writer first, and then time management turned out to be a topic I cared about that other people were willing to read about. So yeah, no, I was always a writer. When I was a kid, I'd write stories in my spare time, just, for fun. I was saying I freelanced for various newspapers to make money. During college, worked at USA Today for a year after college. And then while I was there, began writing columns for them, and that parlayed that into other gigs. So was out on my own doing the freelance writing thing from about age 23 on.
Right. That's a tough beat, no? I remember being a freelance writer as well, and jobs are sparse. So back then they were, and imagine now. Yeah,
well, I mean, I guess you just sort of have to think about it as any other marketable tool. And I got some good breaks on things. I had a business, co-writing books with people for a while. I did a couple of that in ghostwriting projects. So those tend to be longer term, and you can, if the other person gets a really good book deal, it can be quite lucrative. Right. I was writing for magazines, and this was the time when there's both like the magazines, but there's also the online world was starting to come up. People were experimenting with that. So it was like you could play both sides and earn money from both. And then, sort of by the time I know that things have been changing on the economics of that, I was writing my own books, which then between the books and the speaking has been more the direction that my career has gone from there.
Right. Take us on that path towards you being a published author. How did this all start?
Well, it is not a nice and neat story.
A lot of squiggly lines?
No, there's a lot of squiggly lines. So I was, co-writing books with people. So I knew the publishing process. So, right, I actually already had an agent because I was being represented in these co-authoring deals. I knew what publishers were looking for in terms of proposals and all that. So I decided at some point in my mid-20s, I was going to write my own book. And so I did a proposal for a career book, which was actually on the rise of self-employment among young people. Got a small but a book deal for it. And so I wrote this book. The whole thing was a bit of a disaster in terms of bringing the book to market. I think it was a good book, but I went through 3 different editors because they had some massive turnover in this particular publishing house. So nobody cared about it by the time it came out. First-time author, you don't really know about the whole marketing aspect of it. That had never been my responsibility with the other books. And so, trying to figure out how to get it out there and having this a bit naive trust that the publisher, because they had publicists, would do that, which I now know is not something authors should ever depend on, particularly for your first book. So it didn't sell very well at all. And so then I was trying to figure, well, I'm not going to do another book with this publisher. I still would like to write books. So what am I going to do? And so it took a while of figuring out different topics, writing different proposals, writing about different topics, like writing series of articles for publications to try and get interest there. I was working around this proposal on what eventually came a book called 168 Hours, which was my first book on time management, that trying different ways of getting versions of this proposal out there for a long time, switching agents, many things. It finally sold because executive at a different publishing house had seen my name on a writing listserv, had seen that I had reviewed one of the house's other books somewhere, and sent me a note saying, hey, I like that review. That was great. If you're not under contract anywhere, would you ever like to talk about book ideas? I was like, well, sure. Yes, I'd like to talk about book ideas. So I came in, talked about my proposal. We turned it into this 168-hour stuff. So then I get my first time management book. But I wish it was really even straightforward there. Like, that's what I'm going to write out. So I write that. It's doing okay, not huge sales right out of the gate, getting a lot of media attention, which is awesome. But, it's hard to sell books. And so then we're like, well, let's do a money book together. So I do a money book with this same publisher, and same thing, sort of crickets, like nobody cares. And then in the course of writing this, I got this idea to do a short ebook that was called What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast. So we launched that just a few months after the money book, and that one really took off, like bestseller stuff, which was fun to see, like the difference between a book that nobody cares about and a book that people do. But then I was like, okay, well, clearly the universe is telling me time management is the way to go. So we've gone from there. But yeah, it took a long time. My answer has taken a long time.
All right. So wait a second. Let's back the truck up a little bit. So you basically got a book deal with the next publisher through a book review? Is that what I heard?
Yep. It's not straightforward. Like, okay. I had to meet with them. I had to have a proposal. That book review was, I guess, what got me the meeting.
Okay, wait a second though. Like, how big was this review? Like a paragraph? Like
no. It's the whole article. Like,
it's an article.
1,000 word review of a book.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just some like book review on a website. Just
in a publication. So it was a book review in a publication, like 1,000 words. I mean, you can see how I write through something like that.
Right. That's incredible. So that kind of thing doesn't happen normally, Laura.
I would say it's not true that it doesn't happen. What happens is that you've got 100 things out there and people see one of them.
Got it.
Right.
And
so it's really about how many lines have you cast? How many at-bats have you taken? How many, ships have you sent out hoping something comes back, right? Like, choose your metaphor here. But, you put enough stuff out there, somebody will find something.
Okay, that's a great nugget. So just putting a bunch of content, putting your name out there. So for you, it was through the written word, right?
Yes.
So, okay, great. So that's a great tip right there. Okay, this is good. Wow. And so eventually something had to come through.
One would hope, right? And I do believe that's true. Like, you try lots of things. And when you try lots of things, something eventually happens. It may not be what you thought it was going to be. If the universe had spun slightly differently, maybe it'd be something totally different. But that's always the best way to have some motion happen, is to just try different things.
For sure. What I love asking authors is when they get that box of their first traditionally published books mailed to them and you open it up, what's your feeling? How do you feel?
Well, it was very exciting for me because I'm a reader, of course. So, partly being a writer for my whole life and being a reader and seeing these books and then all of a sudden seeing a book with my name on it, which is really, it's hard to describe. Your ideas have suddenly manifested themselves in this physical product, and that they're out there in the world and people are reading them and hopefully finding pleasure from the experience. And as a reader yourself, that's a really cool feeling.
But also, Laura, like, you worked hard on that book. Like, books are not easy to put together. So when you finally see the end result, it just, I guess, pride, no?
Oh, definitely. There's pride. And I like my books. I mean, I write books that I would want to read. And I'm always happy to see it and know that I've done hopefully a good job on it, and open it and start reading and be like, "Ooh, I like that sentence. That was a good one."
Nice. All right. So Laura Vanderkam today is big time because I've seen your stuff on the Today Show. You have a TED Talk that has over 2 million views on YouTube. So are these the ways that you promote yourself these days? So like social media, video, traditional media, is that the way you go today?
To a degree. I find that the best ways to promote books are a little bit different from that. I was saying it's hard to sell books, which is really objectively true in terms of, because it's a product that costs money, but it also makes a demand of the person who is purchasing it. So it's not just a monetary purchase, it's a purchase that's going to consume time. So first of all, most people aren't really readers. Like the average adult reads something like, very few books per year. And so probably, unless you're Harry Potter, you're not going to be one of those books. So we're talking about a smaller chunk of adults who read. And within that, then people need to know that your book exists. And then they also need a compelling reason to read it. And so it's more about your individual marketing to people. So people feel they know you, that they feel they have this relationship with you, that therefore they want to buy your book and read it. So certainly things like my own email list of people who have subscribed to my newsletters and have kept opening them. Then they see it and they're like, oh yeah, she's got a book out. I want to buy that. Right. People who read my blog, people who listen to my podcast, Best of Both Worlds. Those are certainly people who are the core market for purchasing my book. And those are people who feel like they know me. The second way, obviously, you can get at that is when somebody that a reader trusts recommends a book, because that also then makes you sort of vicariously feel like you have a relationship with the person. That's also a compelling reason. I mean, that was what Oprah's magic was, right? Like, she's in people's homes at 4 p.m. every day. So when she says, oh, you should read this book, it's like, oh, well, my friend is recommending it. I mean, your friend being Oprah, it's a very one-sided relationship, but still, it's the same thing. So you're getting people to tell their friends about it, getting sort of influential bloggers to tell their readers about it, podcasters to tell their listeners about it. All of these are actually, often more effective than most major media because people don't feel like they have the same relationship with a lot of media. The fact that there was an article written about your book, like that's great. That can bring it to people's attention. But then it's like your friend saying, oh, that was actually really good. That makes you then pull the trigger on buying it.
Right. Do you make an effort to network, to make contacts in the media and whatnot, or do you have somebody else do that? Or
a lot of it cannot be outsourced. I mean, some of it can, but I mean, I get pitches all the time from places, and I tend not to take many of them unless it's like a really, really cool story. Right. Because there's a lot of stories out there. I mean, it really is about, somebody, they're a good interview, they've got something cool to tell. So I have, built up a lot of connections in media and in the blogging world and podcasting world over the years. And, I reach out to a lot of people, and I do that personally. Like if I know the person, I've talked to them before, I'm definitely going to be the one who's sending them an email saying, hey, can I send you my book? I'm going to be the one mailing it, in fact, because I want it to go out with my handwriting, even on the envelope. Sure. So yeah, that's, I think that's more effective than most outsourcing of it.
For sure. Earlier you were talking about like spreading your content around, like putting like a lot of spaghetti up against the wall, I guess, per se, to get your word out there. Were there targeted places that you placed your content, or like social media that you wanted to put your name out to? Like, was there a strategy?
I don't know that there's been a particular strategy of trying to, I'm glad to have anybody write about my stuff or talk about my stuff. Sure. I know that my book publicists who work at the publisher themselves, they have more of a process in that they're trying to get certain major media markets to cover it right at the beginning. And then it kind of goes from there. So, of course, they're the ones trying to say, well, let me contact all 3 major TV networks and see if we can get on one of those morning shows and sure. Seeing if one bites, then you tell the other 2 to see if they'd give it more time or whatever. Yeah. But you're trying to get one and then you wouldn't do the other 2, right? Like this is just sort of how the way it works with those kinds of media. Or I've had a good relationship with the Wall Street Journal, for instance. I've had the opportunity to write about some of my books for them. But then that's like the first place first major newspaper you would write about it from, right? Like they want to know that it's going to be there first. So that's a bit more of a process. Most online stuff is a little different. You're just trying to get lots of people to do it.
Do you find with the traditional media, it sticks for you? Like, can you track, okay, I sold a book because of my appearance on the Today Show. Can you track that? Or
I mean, you can. It's great to be on television for brand recognition, for getting yourself out there as an expert. Certainly people see it, and that if they've been thinking about buying the book, they might do it. I think the biggest hits tend to come from, I've certainly seen more spikes from certain influential people who are influential within the book buying world, talking about and raving about, giving attention to a book. So just to put some names out there for, podcasters, for instance, or bloggers that people might have heard of, Anne Bogle runs Modern Mrs. Darcy, which is a book website, and she runs a podcast called What Should I Read Next? And when she recommends a book, you can see that. You can see that in sales because her readers are all book buyers, right? So there's no second layer of like, oh, well, first they, have to they see it, but then it also has to be the people who buy books. Like all her readers buy books. So that's one thing. I was on Gretchen Rubin, who wrote The Happiness Project and several other books, did an interview with me about my most recent book, which was Off the Clock, on her website. And that also got a fair amount of attention because, again, a lot of the people who read her have also bought her books, and they clearly like self-development books. That's her whole genre. That translated very well in terms of people also deciding that they would like to check out my books as a result of that. It's a very complicated landscape that I think saw a bigger boost from those two, or about the same as I saw from having an essay in the review section of the Wall Street Journal, which it's kind of nuts if you think about it, but it's true.
Yeah, I just don't know traditional media is as powerful as it once was. So this does not surprise me that you're having the success, being with the Gretchen Rubins of the world and whatnot. So it's great. I'm glad that's working for you. And you just mentioned your book, Off the Clock. Can you tell the listeners about it and how it can help them?
Sure. So I write about time management and productivity, and my most recent book is called Off the Clock, Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. It's a look at time perception. And the central question is, why do some people feel relaxed about time, feel like time is abundant, even people with very full lives? And yet other people who are sort of equivalently busy feel like they are racing around like chickens with their head cut off. I mean, what is the difference between these two schools of thought when it comes to time? So I had 900 people with full-time jobs and families track their time for a day.
Wow.
I asked them questions about how they felt about their time. So I could compare the schedules of people who felt like time was abundant with people who felt like time was scarce and see what are they doing differently. These, again, are all equivalently busy people. So how are they treating time differently? What are they doing differently with their time that allows them to have this different perception? And so the answers to that are explored in this book, Off the Clock.
I love the hook. I love that. Awesome. So, Laura, can you tell people where to buy the book and where they could find out more about you?
Sure. Well, Off the Clock is available in most major bookstores, or certainly online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, any of those places. Also available as ebook and audiobook. I'm narrating. If you're the kind of person who listens to podcasts, you might like audiobooks. So please check out that version of it. You can listen to that in your car while commuting to work as well. Come visit my website, which is lauravanderkam.com. Yeah, I blog about 4 times a week there, so lots of new content going on there, and would love to have some of your listeners visit me. It's a really nice comment section too, very supportive. So that's good.
Fantastic. Laura, this has been great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Everybody out there, check out Laura's new book, check out her podcast, check out the blog. She knows what she's talking about. Go to her website. Do that right now. Everybody, thanks again for listening. Thank you for just checking out the show. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Stand Out Now podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and rate and review it as well. You can find out more about our program at thestandoutnowpodcast.com. Thanks again and enjoy your week.